to learn now is the meaning of the nodes, the lunar nodes, Rahu and Ketu, when they are on the zodiacal axis between Pisces and Virgo. To do that, let's begin by reviewing what Rahu and Ketu themselves mean. And to understand what Rahu and Ketu symbolize, let's first really quickly understand what Rahu and Ketu are, because they're not planets. To understand what they are, just take a simple diagram with the Earth in the middle and draw the apparent orbit of the Sun around it and also the Moon. And then you'll notice that the two paths cross in two spots. And those are the two lunar nodes, the two intersections between the lunar path and the solar path. Eclipses happen at either of these two spots, but what differentiates the two is that at one spot, the one that's on top in our diagram, the moon will be coming up north, and at the other spot, it will be going down south below the ecliptic. So the one that's going north is called Rahu, or the north node, or the ascending node, and the one that's where the moon is going south is called Ketu, or the south node, or the descending node. And that is the basis for the opposite symbolism between the two. It's the up-down dichotomy. Rahu is up and Ketu is down. That's why Rahu represents things increasing, getting higher, getting more amplified, or getting bigger. And Ketu represents things decreasing and going down, getting deeper, and getting more compressed. Other polarities are derived from this basic one, and the next important one is that Rahu represents things coming out. That's why it represents things which are extroversive and external, and that's why it's considered worldly. Whereas Ketu, on the other hand, represents things going in. So that's why it represents things which are introverted and internal, and that's why it's considered spiritual or psychological or mystical. And a further implication of this up-down polarity is chronologically speaking. So chronologically, Rahu, the north node, represents things coming forward, and Ketu, the south node, is things going backward. In terms of time, that represents future for Rahu and past for Ketu. Now, although these two nodes have this opposite nature of up-down, there's also something which they have extremely similar about them. They both cause eclipses. So the nature of an eclipse is very important to understanding the symbolism of both of the nodes. Both of the nodes share this common symbolism of indicating sudden, radical, unexpected change. And therefore, they both indicate instability, things that cause sudden change and the fear and the chaos that comes with it, and also things that we were unprepared for and therefore we are not capable of dealing with. So things which are happening to us inevitably, and we are weak to fight against them. And that's why these nodes have a very big role to play in any kind of obsession, compulsion, or addiction. So the basic effect that Rahu Ketu have in their sign or house or in their conjunctions is to stretch or amplify the differences between things. So they exaggerate. And that's basically how we will interpret them. They exaggerate and destabilize by doing so. Polarize. So that is a good review of what the nodes themselves symbolize. Now we want to think about what this axis between Virgo and Pisces is all about. To explore this, let's ask, first of all, what is synergistic about Virgo and Pisces together working as a team? One thing is that both of the signs are dual in their quadruplicity. The dual quadruplicity is very informed, educated, and intelligent. Another thing about Pisces and Virgo is that the two signs are water and earth. And water and earth are complementary, and they indicate fertility. And a third thing which is synergistic or complementary about Pisces and Virgo is something about the rulers of these two signs. Pisces ruled by Jupiter and Virgo ruled by Mercury. Both of these planets are very knowledge-oriented. One is about the intellect and the other is about wisdom. So if we put Rahu Ketu on this axis, we're going to kind of exaggerate, or we could say accentuate, these synergies between Pisces and Virgo. So this is why we find that people with the nodes here are intelligent. And they have a fertility in their intelligence. But the relationship between Pisces and Virgo is not all good. There's also things about the two signs which is not complementary. There's things that clash. For example, the water element and the earth element might be complementary, but they also clash in a sense. Because water is feelings and earth is very objective or practical or tangible. So in this context of Jupiter and Mercury and intelligence and everything, this clash should be described as water having to do with imagination and earth having to do with calculation. And also Jupiter and Mercury, the rulers of these two signs, they do have that thing in common, is that they're both good with knowledge. But they both have kind of a clash in what type of knowledge and the way they go about their knowledge. Mercury is about an individual's intellect, so Mercury is more like a scientist discovering things. Jupiter is more about learning from a teacher, and so it's more like receiving information from tradition or receiving information from textbooks or receiving information from scriptures. So natives with the nodes here, they deal with this dichotomy. They deal with the dichotomy of being ideological like Pisces versus practical, realistic Virgo. They have a clash between the idealized world versus the real world. And they also have a clash between the use of intuition or imagination or fantasy versus the use of logic and maths and real reality. The further that we push these two opposites apart from each other, the more disabled we become, the more handicapped we become. The key to thriving with a Rahu Ketu in Pisces and Virgo is to bring the two together, to bring imagination into a practical form, to bring intuition into a scientific, measurable realm, to use logic with inspiration, to bring your idealism into common everyday tasks. That's the key for thriving with the nodes in Pisces and Virgo. The final step to understanding Rahu Ketu on this axis, Pisces Virgo, is to look at people who have it. And it's easiest to look at people that we all know about, or it's easy to find out basic information about. So let's look at some famous people with the nodes in Pisces and Virgo. First of all, we find that a lot of intellectuals have this placement. And that's good because this is the main theme of Rahu Ketu in Pisces and Virgo, is very intelligent, ingenious, right? That was the main thing. But the clash is between how are you using your intelligence? Is it intuitive? Is it rational? Is it scientific? Is it philosophical? Is it ideological? Is it practical? How are you able to bring those two extremes together? Here are some specific names. With Rahu in Virgo, you have Stephen Hawking, Joseph Campbell, and I did not really research the correct pronunciation of these names, so forgive. René Guénon, Jean-Paul Sartre, Marie Curie, Oppenheimer, and Niels Bohr. The top four are really, really exemplary of Rahu in Virgo specifically, as opposed to Rahu being in Pisces. Stephen Hawking, very atheistic. So he's really not on the Piscean side of things which you maybe cannot directly touch immediately and feel and see, but which are real nonetheless. He's definitely not on that side. He's definitely strongly on the side of, if I can measure it, it is real. If I can calculate it, then it's true. So he's a really good example of extreme intelligence, which is very heavy into Virgo, favoring the Virgo side of the dynamic. Joseph Campbell, another very interesting name because he's a scientist of religion. He's kind of the first to establish the concept of like religious studies as a science. René Guénon is basically the founder of metaphysics. So again, this whole concept of taking spiritual things and bringing them into scientific discussion. Jean-Paul Sartre, the father of existentialism. The final three names, these guys are all nuclear atomic physicists. It's very interesting because it's taking the things which are beyond vision, the atom, tiny, super tiny things, and bringing them into measured discussion, scientific discussion. If we have Rahu and Pisces, I wonder what names will show up on this list. Let's take a look. Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce, Jose Silva, George Gurdjieff, Herman Hesse, Krishnamurti, and also Susan Sontag and John Edward. With the exception maybe of Susan Sontag, all these names are extremely high-octane, high-power mystics. So that is the main thing which is going on with Rahu Ketu in Pisces and Virgo, is making people very intellectual. Now, it's not that just having Rahu Ketu in Pisces and Virgo makes you intellectual. You have to have other things also. I mean, you have to have a decent Mercury, you have to have a good fifth house, you have to have a good other planets too. But this is one of the important backbones. Another thing that comes out with Rahu Ketu in Virgo Pisces, we'll see a significant number of very, very important artists. Artists are actually basically on the same theme as the intellectuals, except with artists, what you have here, these are people who haven't gone to the extreme of the polarity, but have learned how to meld them and really effectively meld them. So what an artist is really doing is it's taking the Piscean imagination and an intuition and feeliness and is actually giving it some tangible form on a canvas or in a sculpture or something. So with Rahu in Virgo, we have Salvador Dali, Diego Rivera, Rembrandt, Gauguin, and Frank Lloyd Wright, an architect. Salvador Dali, he's taking these really impossible images or these images that don't really happen in real life, but making them look, making them something you can actually see, making them something that's not just in your imagination anymore. Now it's on a piece of paper, now it's on a canvas, now you can see it. So he's taking the Piscean stuff and putting it in Virgo. With Rahu and Pisces, we don't have so many names, but we do have Cézanne and Goya. Another type of artist is the musician. They're doing the exact same thing. The exact same dynamic is happening. The intuition, the ideas, the idealism, the emotionality of Pisces is now being put into something concrete. It's being put into notes and measures and beats, etc., and words. So with Rahu in Virgo, we have Mozart, Franz Liszt, and then modern classics, Aretha Franklin, Bob Dylan, Simon and Garfunkel, both of them, Paul McCartney, Lou Reed and Henry Rollins. These people, these are the Mozarts of their genre. With Rahu and Pisces, again, the list is not so long, but we do have Johnny Cash and Tchaikovsky. Why is the list coming up a little bit short with Rahu in Pisces? Because Ketu would prefer to be in Pisces. Because Ketu is internal by its nature, and Pisces is very deep by its nature. So, of the two placements, Ketu prefers to be in Pisces. You do get a huge boost to your imagination and intuition when you have Rahu in Pisces. And so that's why with the list of intellectuals, we found a lot of outstanding mystics and so forth with Rahu and Pisces. But Rahu and Pisces tends to have a harder time bringing the two together, bringing the two extremes together, which is what we need to do to be able to make art, to express ourselves creatively. A final group of people who show up with their nodes on this axis is criminals. So it is not that criminality is a trademark of Rahu, Ketu, and Virgo and Pisces, but this placement can support criminality because this dichotomy between Pisces and Virgo can malfunction, and you can get a disconnect between what's real and what's unreal, what's in your thoughts and what should actually be in your actions. People who are not able to control and limit the distinction between what they feel like doing and what they actually do. And also it can have people that hate the real world so much because it doesn't live up to their ideal. This is an important thing about the Pisces Virgo difficulty, which affects all of us, even the ones that are not celebrities. It's this dichotomy between the ideal world full of inspirations and ideas versus this practical world which is full of chores and boredom. So if this malfunctions, we get an extreme hatred for the real world because it doesn't match up to what we think it should actually be. So again, with a criminal, you'll have to see something in a lot of things in the chart that are indicating violent behavior, and then with Rahu Ketu in Pisces Virgo, that supports it. So this is actually the same thing that's the case with any of these categories. It's not that Rahu Ketu alone are going to cause something. It's not that any planet alone is going to cause something. It's how all the factors in the chart combine. But as for the criminals, there's the famous names. Rahu in Virgo is Richard Ramirez, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, and the Unabomber. And there's one person with Rahu in Pisces, and that's Elizabeth Bathory. So I hope this gives you a much clearer understanding than you previously had of the dynamic that's being illustrated or symbolized by the nodes being in Pisces and Virgo. If you want to actually have my interpretations for all of your placements in your chart, you can go to my website and order that from the charts page. It's victorcara.com/R2. Thank you so much.